Chapter 23. Scout and Gina checked all the lobby doors, but the handles were chained. They couldn't push them open enough to fit through. Scout grew nervous. In the years she worked here, she'd never seen the doors locked like this. "Is this normal?" Gina asked. "Not at all. Let's go upstairs and talk to my manager." They jogged up the stairs, where Scout entered a code for the projection booth door. Gina followed her reluctantly, which Scout thought was cute. "Mr. Anderson?" Scout called, walking into the safe room. He turned to her. "Yes?" "The doors in the lobby are chained up. Do you know about that?" He stood up, a confused look on his wrinkled face. "No. Did you see who did it?" "No, sir." He walked out of the office, down the hall between auditorium 6 and 7. "Stay up here. I'll check it out." Scout nodded and closed the door. "What's going on?" Gina asked her. "I have no idea." She headed toward the far end of the projection booth, which was very quiet since all the movies had ended. She opened the door to the emergency exit, which led to a small, dusty room with another exit door. It wasn't locked, but something was keeping it from opening. Something on the other side. "What the fuck?" she said quietly but angrily. She ran past Gina to the other end of the booth. That exit was also blocked. "Are we trapped in here?" Gina asked, clearly worried. "Oh God," Scout said, mainly to herself. Only one person would do this. The zombie. "Yes, I think we're trapped. Who is doing this? Someone who doesn't want us to finish the movie. I'm calling for help." Gina pulled out her cell phone and tried to dial out. "I'm not getting a signal." "Yeah, it's impossible to get one in this building." "Do you have a landline?" Scout ran into the office and grabbed a wall-mounted phone. There was no dial tone. She tried another phone on the desk by the door. She slammed the phone down and looked at the monitor tower in the corner of the office. She was given multiple views of the parking lot, lobby, and the long hallway downstairs that ran the length of the building. One of the lobby cameras showed Mr. Anderson walking up to the doors. He pushed on one, looking flabbergasted. Someone appeared from behind a standee near the arcade. Gina gasped. Scout couldn't move or speak. It was the zombie. The figure wore the familiar black hoodie and jeans, with a white mask that was barely visible in the small monitor. But Scout knew it was a zombie mask. The figure slowly crept toward Mr. Anderson as the manager continued checking the door. Scout looked around for a way to warn her boss. There was a code to use the phone as a PA system, but she couldn't remember it. She saw a walkie-talkie sitting on the desk. She grabbed it and yelled, "Mr. Anderson, behind you!" He looked down at the radio on his belt, then turned around. The zombie ran toward him. Mr. Anderson fell as the intruder punched him. Gina screamed. The zombie then looked up at the closest camera, right at Scout. Then he turned and ran out of the lobby, toward the stairs. "He's coming!" Scout said as she grabbed Gina's hand and pulled her down one end of the booth. Someone slammed against the booth door. Scout ran up to one of the projectors and started unscrewing the porthole window. "We're going to sneak into this auditorium and try that emergency exit." She pointed to the exit far below, just under the screen. "Try to do it quietly, okay?" Gina nodded as the door was assaulted again far away. Scout got all 4 screws undone and dropped the window to the floor. Then she helped Gina up and out. The last row was only a few feet off the ground, which often resulted in the patrons in that row blocking the projector's image on the screen. Scout used to hate the design of this theater, but she was thankful for it now. Gina slowly crawled through the small porthole, reaching for the seat tops with her feet. Scout had been paying too much attention to her and nearly missed a figure running up the stairs toward them. "Get back in!" Scout screamed, pulling the girl back into the booth. Gina screamed when she noticed the zombie running toward her. He grabbed her legs and started pulling her back into the auditorium. She kicked and screamed. The zombie yelled when she kicked him in the chest. He fell backward, tripping over the seats behind him. Scout pulled Gina all the way in and told her to run. "Where?" "Upstairs." She pointed to the steps that led to Projector 7. Since auditoriums 6 and 7 were the largest, the projectors had to be set up in higher areas. 7's was the only one that had access to the roof. When they got up to the theater's 3rd floor, Scout started up a thin, black set of steps and pushed on the roof door. She'd expected it to be locked as well and was relieved when it wasn't. When she and Gina got onto the roof, Scout slammed the door shut and looked around for something to block it. There was a barrel a few feet away. With Gina's help, they were able to roll it in front of the door. "Now what?" Gina asked. "We might get a signal from here." She checked her cell phone, but the battery was dead. Gina cursed. "I left mine downstairs in the projection area." "Shit!" Scout ran her fingers through her short hair and looked at all the businesses that surrounded them. "Help us!" she screamed. Gina joined her. They waved their arms at the few cars that drove by on the service road. All the parking lot lights had gone out, like they were supposed to. Scout could barely see Gina by the moonlight. The roof door thumped. Scout spun around and watched the door knock against the heavy barrel. After a few seconds, the man on the other side gave up. "What do we do now?" Gina asked. Scout ran to the rear of the building and looked down. She saw her car below, by the dumpster. "There's a pipe that some of my coworkers like to climb sometimes. I've never done it, but they make it look easy. We might be able to climb down." Gina looked down. "Oh God, that makes me dizzy." "Fear of heights?" "Fear of falling to my death." Scout gave her a sympathetic smile. "Want me to go first?" "It's okay. I can do it." She grabbed the pipe and began climbing down. The bricks that made up the theater jutted out enough to create firm footholds. Once she was down a few feet, Scout started down next. Then she heard something below. It sounded like a door slamming open. "Oh shit! Gina, climb back up!" Gina screamed as the zombie appeared below them, in front of the dumpster. He stared up at them. Then he ran up to the pipe and started climbing. Scout got to the roof and reached over for Gina's hand. Gina started to reach out when she suddenly lost her grip on the pipe. She screamed all the way down to the parking lot. Her scream ended abruptly when she struck the street. Scout stood there in horror, her hands covering her mouth. Gina lay very still, blood pooling around her. Her legs were bent at horrible angles. The zombie looked down at her and then back up at Scout. She stared at him, at his white, cracked face. Both looked down when Gina groaned. She was alive. Sweet Jesus, she was alive. "I can't move," Gina said. Her voice was filled with so much pain, and it broke Scout's heart. The zombie looked up at her again, and then climbed down to the lot. "Get away from her!" Scout screamed. "Help! Somebody call the police! Fire!" She suddenly remembered that the best way to get people to help was to yell, "Fire!" A fire concerned others more than rape or attack on an individual, as much as that sickened Scout. Her voice echoed off the trees across the street. The zombie walked around Gina, as if studying her. Then he pulled something out of his hoodie. It reflected the moon. It was a large knife. "No!" Scout screamed. "Kill me! I'm the one making the movie. Leave her alone. She's done nothing." The zombie looked up at her again, and then kneeled down to get closer to poor Gina. Then he raised the knife over his head. It struck Gina in the heart. Scout screamed as she watched the girl spasm for a moment. And then Gina went perfectly still. The zombie pulled the knife out, tossed it on the ground, looked up at Scout. And then he did something almost as unbelievable as killing a poor paralyzed girl. He shrugged. Then he ran away.